Hello and welcome back to the Northern Traditions podcast. This is the next episode that really inspired me to bring it back, and that is discussing this project named Lineage with the writer and director. I have Robin and Matt here to discuss this project, this movie, and how it seeks to bring Nordic witchcraft, Seidr magic, Völva to the modern audience while still respecting the historic source material. This is originally why they reached out to me, was to find a way to make this as historically accurate as possible and still an entertaining story. And so after talking with them, we ended up creating a really great professional relationship. And that's why I asked them to be on this platform and to share their story with you and the process of making Lineage. Now, this interview was not recorded originally with me to have my voice in here. However, I am going to add my horrific audio during the course of my interview with them a few months ago. And so I apologize for the horrific audio that was not recorded for me, but hopefully you still get the point. And luckily, I don't talk that much. But I hope you enjoy the conversation with Matt and Robin discussing this future project named Lineage and the exploration into Nordic witchcraft.
Sure. Hi, I'm Robin Rose Singer. I'm a filmmaker, and I'm the director of Lineage.
I am Matt Bailey. I'm a longtime former award-winning actor of everything from Broadway to Boardwalk Empire. And as a screenwriter, I like to write stories about second chances and oftentimes themes of grief, redemption, and as hard as it may be to find some days, hope.
Lineage is a psychological thriller, and it follows Annie Bell, a New York writer who has always prided herself on telling the truth. And Annie has kind of like cultivated an echo chamber for herself where she's the smartest, savviest, funniest person in this, concrete palace that she's built, and she's got a fan base to match. But when her estranged mother suddenly goes missing, Annie has to return home to her remote rural hometown and finally confront an awful past that she hoped she could just bury forever. Strange things start happening almost immediately, and Annie soon learns that her mother and maybe her sister may not be the people that she thought they were. So, as Annie searches for her mom, she also learns the truth about why her family fell apart and the secrets buried in her lineage. So the film is also heavily based on Norse mythology, paganism, and history.
What was the inspiration of having Seidr or Volva as a core element of the story?
Okay, well, so when I was beginning my research, I really wanted to find like an unknown or untapped piece of history or mythology to draw from. This coming from a kid who tried to learn how to read Egyptian hieroglyphics when I was a kid, and I used to read Greek mythology like while eating cereal in the mornings. So I was very interested in something that had a rich historical tradition. And where I landed after diving briefly into sort of paganism and Wiccanism area is I ultimately fell into the northern traditions and the very deep rabbit hole of Norse mythology, which I knew about Thor and Loki and Ragnarok and a lot of these things, but I was surprised to find that there were so many more stories that I never heard of. These sweeping epic tales of gods and monsters, and that rivaled anything Greek or Roman that I had heard about. And what, like through reading the translations of the Codex Regius and the Poetic Edda and the Havamal and some other things, I got really fascinated with the Völva and the traditions of the staff-carrying woman, specifically their practices of Seidr magic. And I loved this idea that Seidr was inseparable from nature and drew from the spirit and the power of the land, and that not only were these women irreplaceable members of their own societies, but they were huge players in Norse mythology itself. Most famously, they were the ones who delivered the prophecy of Ragnarok to Odin, and yet the common person knows nothing about them. So needless to say, I found that to be a huge opportunity to incorporate some of that into a story that no one had heard before, and in doing so, maybe shed light on some really overlooked and underappreciated parts of history.
Next question is, how will Seidr magic be portrayed within the film?
So I want to make sure that we honor Seder both as a spiritual practice and a community service. My whole kind of mantra for the film that people on our team have heard me repeat many times is that it should feel like having your bare feet in the soil with like moonlight on your skin. It should smell like dirt, right? So I'd like the magic in the film to feel that way too, natural, primal, rooted, real. Sound design and music, like for the chanting and any sort of, drumming or percussive elements that we incorporate will be a huge part. The goal is to make it feel immersive and real, sort of how you would feel if you were to participate in an actual Seidr ritual.
What methods have been taken to respect the source and inspiration behind this film?
We have done a lot of research about Seidr, both how it's practiced today and how it may have been practiced in the past. I've been reading a ton on the runes, and Jacob, you gave us an excellent reading list as well. It took me down a total rabbit hole. I have like a stack of books on either side here, and then some Kindle books also. And then we also have a wonderful Norwegian producer on our team, Vibeke Dale de la Pola, who has been an absolute saint in answering all of my many questions, you know, about, again, like how things are practiced and modern, you know, Scandinavia or Norway, and how the past has also, oh, sorry, I flubbed that one a little bit. Can I just take that back? Yeah, I just want to. So we also have a wonderful Norwegian producer on our team, Vibeke Dale de la Pola, who has been a total saint in answering all my questions about how these pieces of history are still preserved today in modern Norway and Scandinavia, and just the history in general.
What are your thoughts on previous Norse or Viking inspired projects like Midsummer or The Ritual?
I think there's this tendency to make a lot of Northern traditions, and certainly not limited to Northern traditions, but this tendency to make them sort of inherently evil and sort of overtly weird, as in, like in The Ritual, you have this Norse pagan-inspired monster, right, who is a descendant of Loki, spoiler, and this god demands human sacrifice and in return grants the cult members immortality, right, which is a bit hairy in and of itself to me, because for starters, like, what is the nature of sacrifice, as in, like, what does that even mean? Like, we understand sacrifice in terms of a protester setting themselves on fire, right? That's a statement we understand. But when it's just treated as death, as in people need to die to serve God with no further explanation than that, it makes this God in question inherently evil and inherently mean in a sense. And I think that in a sense creates a weak motive. It's like having a cliche devil in your movie just doing bad things because that's what the devil does. Like, okay, but if your devil is the antagonist of this story, it's way more interesting if they have their own want and need, and it's a want that an audience can understand, right? Like in Hereditary, the demon Paimon needs a host body, right? That makes sense and operates as a goal. But in The Ritual, this frost giant or whatever it is just seems to want to kill for sport, and this cult surrounding it makes, you know, they make them into these sort of seemingly insane followers who make weird dolls and mummify each other and perhaps go a little overboard in bastardizing some very meaningful traditions. And I think Midsummer also dances a little along these lines too, like where human sacrifice is played a little for sport, and it makes this 1,000-year-old tradition of May Day into this drug-induced celebration of essentially meaningless death. Because again, in our eyes, the audience's eyes, we don't necessarily understand what's at stake for them, which sort of paints this fantastical Swedish society, which is based on real traditions, as crazy religious fanatics for entertainment value, which I think might be offensive to those who may still respectfully practice some of those traditions today. And while I don't think Ari Aster was necessarily trying to poke fun at those people, I do think you can do both, show the fault in their ways while respecting traditions at the same time.
This is just like a throw out there question, but have both of you seen the Northman movie as well?
I saw the very beginning of The Northman.
Yeah, I've only
and I
seen
have yet to
some.
finish.
I need to catch up too.
This is me giving you homework. This is what you have to do, is check out Northman. Northman is kind of like that middle ground where a lot of people really liked it, to like representation. I think it captures the essence and the theme of the Eddas really well. A lot of people didn't like that it went heavily into like the Viking warrior aesthetic and stuff like that, but there are some really great say their magic scenes in there. So definitely, if you haven't seen those, definitely check them out. And I would say of all the media that I see about Norse paganism, the Viking Age, I think this is the one that gets things the most correct, even if it still has its flaws. And I think a lot of people would agree with that too. So the next question is, what are you both most excited about this project?
Well, so I grew up with a really strong spiritual connection to nature, and magic and some version of paganism, though my dad never called it that, was actually a huge part of how I grew up. So I feel really excited and honored to be the caretaker of a story like this. I don't think we get to do a lot of more spiritual work in the film industry. And, you know, coupling it with a very entertaining and historically driven story, especially a female forward story, is super exciting to me. I became a mom earlier, like about a year and a half ago. So my concept of the divine feminine has kind of shifted a little bit and expanded, and it's been really, really cool to now tell a mother-daughter story against a backdrop of magic and Norse mythology.
Again, yeah, it's what I sort of discovered in my research is there's just so much sort of unmined history that is not only interesting, but just has a whole nother truth to it. Like for instance, we all know the myth of Pandora, right? From a distance, we learn at school, like Pandora found this box. She was told she wasn't supposed to open it because it was dangerous. She opened it anyway, and all hell broke loose, right? So that's how everyone knows Pandora's box, right? But if you actually go into the myth and read about it, you find that there's a whole nother tale in there, that she was gifted this box with, it's not actually a box. First of all, it was a vase, it was more like a vase. And it was a gift for Pandora. And they knew that she was going to open it. So in fact, she was a little bit gaslit into opening it. And when she did, the end of the story is that she put the top back on when she realized what she had done, right? And she trapped Hope inside of this jar, saving Hope, as it were. So there's like an entirely different way to look at this story that everyone seemingly knows, but there's a lot more to the story. And that's sort of how I look at this whole piece, is it's an opportunity to tell a lot of unknown truths and find out about a lot of things that are under the surface, both personally for our character Annie Bell, but also for Norse mythology and some of these traditions.
Next question is, what do you think my audience, particularly Norse mythology enthusiasts, Norse pagans, will appreciate about this unique spin on what Lineage has to offer?
Yeah, like I said about Pandora just now, like I think there is an authenticity and sort of homage, not only to the past and the traditions, but to the stories of the past and to the mythology of the past. I really think that filling in some of the gaps and unknown spaces in some of the more well-known stories of Thor and excuse me, of Odin, and sort of how the women of this history fit into that tale, I think is a really unique opportunity. And I think it'll be really interesting to people how we do that.
Yeah, I think, and just for the sake of conversation, women have a very prominent role clearly within Norse society. And we see that within even the writings of like Tacitus about the German people. And the interesting thing about media in the past so far is it really tries to pinpoint women into like the shield maiden role, which I think, there were definitely, some women who were shield maiden, but I think it kind of defeats the point when there are things such as, say, their magic, such as Völva, that we see women already in such significant roles. So I think it's really amazing to see, like, hey, let's look into a historically accurate reason to raise women up and represent them in this kind of way. And so for me personally, I think that's one of the things I'm very excited about with this project. And the next question would be more logistically, where will this project be shown to an audience?
So we are going to be offering theatrical pre-screenings for our early contributors across the country, giving our community of supporters an exclusive chance to watch the film together before its wide release. And then after that, will be available digitally on major streaming platforms for audiences around the world. That's the goal, at least. And as part of the contributor experience, early will also receive a digital copy to watch from home. So trying to get out to as many people as we can.
And this is actually a question I don't know the answer to. And if you're like, yeah, we don't really know either, feel free. But I don't know how the process works. Like with the Netflix age, with Hulu and whatever, do you have to make the movie first and then kind of present it to them and see if they want to actually put it on the streaming service?
Yeah, for independence, that's usually the process. Film is, they call it an execution dependent medium. So even though we have this amazing script, they want to see something basically before, because production is a wild ride, and it's not exactly something you can plan out. Things, give and take and change throughout the process. So yeah, they want to see a finished product first and see how beautiful our film is going to be before they agree to distribute it.
How can someone support this project if they're interested?
So people can support Lineage by becoming contributors through our exclusive contributor campaign. There's a whole range of levels at which to join the community, tons of rewards and exclusive benefits for being a part of the film at this early stage while we're still incubating it and getting it off the ground. We're an independent film working outside the studio system, which is really exciting because we can go directly to our audience without any middle people to help us make the film happen. It's a much more intimate and grassroots experience, and our contributors get to share the whole process from start to finish. So it's pretty cool. It's obviously also a lot of work. So we welcome any and all support and helping spread the word. Yeah, we're excited to build that community and get going making this project together.
This is more just like a fun little story thing. Where my family's from is in Cincinnati, and they had someone on the news. There was like like a local filmmaker filming a movie in Cincinnati, and it had, I think, Tom Hardy in it. It had some big names, and they were interviewing. They were like, "Yeah, here's the screenwriter and everything, and the director." And they're like, "How can you, what should people know about this movie?" And they're like, "Please buy a ticket. You do not understand. Please, you have to support us." And I think this kind of shows, how the film industry is changing.
Yeah.
And both for a good and a bad, and and this is kind of wrapped into the last question, is we've moved away from almost like, we're seeing these massive movies kind of fall apart. Like, they have $400 million budgets, and it's like people just aren't watching them anymore. And so what do you think are kind of like the challenges, but also the benefits of this changing landscape in film?
I mean, I think it forces us, all filmmakers to really find their people, and it really takes a village to create these stories and to tell these stories on film. So creating a community even beforehand, through crowdfunding and like when you watch the end credits, there's hundreds of people on that list, and getting those people together to assemble at the beginning can really help get that ball start rolling, because then you're starting with people who believe in you, you're starting with fans, you're starting with people who want to all bring that message together in the film and bring it to the community. So we're inviting people to join us in that journey of making this story happen, because there's really no other way to do it. um, it's the only way these movies get made is to have all these people pulling in the same direction. So we thought doing something like this would get people interested, get people excited, to come on board with us and make something really special.
The final question I had here, and it kind of expands in two different ways. So, what have you read to learn more about Seidr magic, and what have you learned since you started this creation process?
So I have absolutely loved all of the research that we've been able to do. Like I said, went down a ton of rabbit holes with a huge stack of books. The two that really stood out for me about Seidr in particular, I really liked The Gate is Open by Katie Gerard. It's more of a firsthand account of her experience, which I thought was really, really interesting to hear like a more modern take on her experience with Seidr. And then there's a great book by Dean Kirkland that I'm in the middle of right now that feels very thorough from a historical perspective as well as coupled with the spiritual side. We definitely went back to the original source material, the Poetic Edda, the Prose Eddas, and then I have a stack of books on runes as well. And some YouTube accounts that have been actually really, really wonderful to hear people just speak directly to the community about their experience. So it's been a blast, and I'm always looking to hear from more people with experience if anybody does want to reach out and talk about it, because the authenticity is something that's really important to us. So open ears.
I mean, that's all the official questions, but I think, I'll leave the last moment here. If there's anything else you want to add, anything you want to say about the project, or if there's anything you want to ask my audience that you'd be interested in hearing their opinion on.
Bailey, you got me. I gotta think about that. I'd love to hear from the audience.
For sure. Like, there's such an interest. Just I was thinking about the runes themselves, and like, what do things mean that have lasted so long? Like, I feel like mythology itself has lasted the stretch of time for a reason, because there's something inherently interesting and inherently powerful about where the stories came from and what they mean and what we do with them now. And I think, in the age of the internet and in 2024, like, we seemingly seem so advanced and we have all this information at our fingertips, and there's still something about those old stories that is like so guttural, and it seems like they're innate to us. And I really think that taking some of that material and using it to tell an emotional story that highlights a lot of this history will be a really interesting and meaningful story for everyone to watch. And I really invite people to learn more about Lineage and read more about us and come on board and help tell this story with us.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add that, within the historical context, there is something just so timeless about all of these practices. And, for me, part of even having lived in New York for the past like 20 years, you realize just how disconnected you are from so many things that are so much more important and so much greater than the things that we worry about in our day-to-day sort of urban lives. So hoping to inspire a return to practices or virtues and values that I feel matter. Reconnecting with nature has always been a theme of my work, and just respecting nature and respecting the power and magic and traditions of not just the past, but how do we put that into practice in a modern life. Those are the pieces of this that really stand out for me. And I think that being able to hear from your community about this is really special, because these are people that have connected with that interest so deeply already. So yeah, I mean, I would absolutely love to hear anybody's take on living a spiritual and connected life in the modern world and how that's being implemented in their daily lives. I think it's just, it's fascinating, it's powerful, and it's really exciting.
With that, this interview had ended, and I just want to thank Robin and Matt and the entire team who has contacted me and spoken with me. It's been a really amazing experience getting to discuss Lineage and the vision behind it. And so if you do want to support this work, I'll leave all the links down below. But other than that, I'm just excited to see more Viking Age media come into fruition, just because I think there is such a magic and a beauty to the mythology discussed in the ancient Scandinavian world. With that, thank you so very much for joining me for this episode of the Northern Traditions podcast, and I greatly look forward to seeing Lineage and this modern interpretation of Nordic witchcraft.